In the summer of 2016, Ireland's Statistics Office published a number so absurd that a Nobel Prize-winning economist laughed at it in public. The Irish economy, the official data said, had grown by 26% in a single year. Not a boom, not a miracle. 26%, later revised to 34%, the kind of growth no economy in human history has ever achieved. No new factories had opened. No wave of jobs appeared. Nothing on the streets of Dublin looked any different. Paul Krugman gave the phenomenon a name that stuck like a curse: Leprechaun economics, because what had actually happened wasn't growth at all. One American company had quietly moved a pile of paperwork to Dublin, and the paperwork was worth $300 billion. Today, the country whose economy is officially, admittedly, spectacularly, not what it says on the label. Today, on the Money Atlas, how a small island became the accounting capital of the world, and why its own government invented a new number to tell itself the truth. Quick thing before we dig in. If you enjoy stories that make the world make sense, subscribing is the best way to see the next one, and it costs you nothing. All right, let's get into it. Start with the official scoreboard because it's genuinely spectacular. GDP per person. Ireland sits above $130,000, nearly 50% richer than the United States, more than double Germany. On paper, this rainy island of 5 million people is one of the 2 or 3 richest substantial countries on Earth, trading blows with Luxembourg and Switzerland. And if you've watched this series, you know Switzerland earned its place with pharma, precision, and trust. So what's Ireland's product? Here's the uncomfortable answer the Irish government itself will give you. A big part of that number doesn't exist, not in Ireland anyway. Rewind to that impossible number. What actually happened in 2015 is that Apple, under pressure over its old tax structures, restructured its Irish subsidiaries, and in doing so moved roughly $300 billion of intellectual property, the rights to the iPhone's design, software, and brand, onto the books of an Irish resident company. Under international accounting rules, all the profit that IP generates worldwide suddenly counted as Irish economic output. One transaction, executed by lawyers in January. Ireland's economy grew by a quarter. The cranes on the Dublin skyline didn't move. GDP, it turns out, doesn't measure what happens in a country. It measures what's booked there. The machine behind this is decades old and completely legal. Since the 90s, Ireland offered the developed world's most attractive corporate tax rate, 12.5%, versus 35% in America at the time, plus EU membership, English, and courts you can trust. American giants answered at scale: Apple, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Pfizer. They didn't just open offices. They parked their most valuable asset, intellectual property, in Irish subsidiaries, so that global profits legally landed in Dublin. Even 60% of the world's leased aircraft are managed through Ireland. The result is an economy that hosts the paperwork of trillions, while actually employing a few 100,000 people in those firms. For decades, the machine's crown jewel was a structure so elegant accountants gave it a cocktail name, the Double Irish. Simplified, an American giant sets up 2 Irish companies. Company 1 sells products across Europe and books enormous revenue. But Company 1 owes gigantic royalty fees for using the brand and patents, paid to Company 2, which is Irish registered but, under old Irish law, tax resident in Bermuda, where the corporate tax rate is around 0. Profit lands in Dublin, pays a royalty, and evaporates into the Atlantic. Add a Dutch entity in the middle, the Dutch sandwich, and billions flowed, fully legally, at effective tax rates below 1%. Brussels and Washington eventually forced the loophole shut in 2020. The companies stayed anyway. The relationship, it turns out, had become the product. How big is the illusion? Ireland's own statisticians measured it. GDP in 2024, 533 billion euros. But strip out the multinational accounting, the profits that merely pass through, the depreciation on other people's IP, the leased jumbo jets that never land there, and Ireland's honest economy, called GNI Star, is 312 billion. The gap, over 200 billion euros. Roughly 40% of Ireland's official economy is, functionally, a mirage, real money, but not Irish money. It belongs to shareholders in California and pension funds in Texas. Which led to one of the most remarkable admissions in statistical history. In 2017, the Central Bank of Ireland did something no country had ever done. It officially gave up on GDP as a measure of its own economy and invented a replacement. GNI Star exists because Irish policymakers couldn't govern with the official number. It was so distorted that debt ratios, spending rules, and EU comparisons had all become meaningless. Think about what that means. The global standard measure of economic success, the number that moves elections and markets everywhere, declared unusable by the very country it flattered most. Ireland became the first nation to formally admit, our GDP is a lie. And then things got stranger. In 2016, the European Commission ruled that Ireland's arrangements with Apple were illegal state aid and ordered Apple to pay Ireland 13 billion euros in back taxes. Free money, enough to build hospitals for a decade. Ireland's response: it appealed. The Irish government spent 8 years and millions in legal fees fighting for the right to not receive 13 billion euros. Why? Because the money was never the product. The product is the promise that Ireland is a safe, predictable, loyal home for multinational capital. Accepting the ruling would tell every client the deal could change retroactively. In 2024, Europe's top court sided with the Commission anyway. The money landed. Ireland took it, reluctantly, like a waiter forced to accept a tip that insults the restaurant. It's worth asking how Ireland, of all places, became corporate America's European home, because the answer isn't just tax. In the 1980s, Ireland was Western Europe's poor cousin. Unemployment near 20%, its young emigrating by the plane load. Its weapon was a state agency, the IDA, that pursued American multinationals with the patience of a chess player. Low taxes, yes, but also an English-speaking, educated workforce, EU market access, and red carpets rolled out decades before anyone else thought to. The pivotal win, Intel 1989, a billion-dollar chip plant that told every boardroom in America that Ireland was safe. Pharma and tech followed in herds. The tax code opened the door, but it was the courtship, the talent, and the EU passport that furnished the house. Now, is this a scam? Here's the honest picture. The arrangement is very real money for Ireland. Corporate tax receipts have exploded to nearly 30 billion euros a year, funding schools, roads, pensions. But look at the concentration. Roughly 10 foreign companies pay more than half of it. Ireland's public finances now depend on the boardroom decisions and tax lawyers of a handful of American giants. If Washington changes its tax code, or one pharma patent expires, or one tech giant restructures again, a chunk of the Irish state's income vanishes as quickly as it arrived in 2015. It is, as Irish economists say, windfall money and windfall's end. The world did eventually gang up on the model. In 2021, nearly 140 countries signed the OAK's global minimum tax. Multinationals pay at least 15% somewhere. no matter where profits hide. Ireland resisted, then signed, raising its sacred 12. 5-15 for the giants. The predicted exodus never came. Why? Because by then Ireland's moat wasn't the rate, it was everything around it. 20 years of installed factories and data centers, tens of thousands of specialized workers, the legal certainty, the ecosystem. 15% of an enormous, sticky profit pool turned out to be more revenue than 12.5 of a mobile one. The great irony of the crackdown, it made Ireland richer. To its credit, Ireland knows this, and in 2024 it did something we've seen before in this series. It created the Future Ireland Fund, a sovereign wealth fund, explicitly modeled on Norway's, to bank the multinational windfall before it evaporates, targeting €100 billion by the mid-2030s. It's the Norway lesson from episode 4, applied to a very different resource. Instead of oil under the seabed, Ireland is drilling the gap between tax codes. And exactly like oil, the smart move is the same. Treat it as temporary, save it, and never let the state get addicted to money it doesn't control. Whether politicians can resist spending it, that's the eternal test. So what is Ireland really? Underneath the accounting fog, a genuinely successful European economy, educated, open, export smart, with real strengths in pharma and tech operations. But its households consume at roughly the EU average. Its young people face one of Europe's worst housing crises. Dublin rents devour paychecks that the per capita statistics claim are royal. Paper Ireland is 50% richer than America. Real Ireland is a good, normal, richish European country with an extraordinary side business in accounting hospitality. Both are true. Only one of them shows up in the headlines and in populist speeches about how well the economy is doing. And here's the paradox that makes modern Ireland genuinely strange to live in. The state is drowning in money, running budget surpluses of a size the rest of Europe can only dream about, banking billions it literally struggles to spend fast enough. And simultaneously, its citizens face one of the worst housing crises in the developed world. Too few homes, Dublin rents consuming entire paychecks, 30-somethings in childhood bedrooms, and a dark echo of the 1980s, young Irish emigrating to Australia and Canada in rising numbers. A country can have a rich government, booming statistics, and a squeezed population all at once. If GDP were lived experience, Dublin would feel like Zurich. Walk around. It doesn't. That gap between the number and the life is this whole episode in one city. The lesson of Ireland travels everywhere. GDP was designed in the 1930s to measure production you could touch, steel, wheat machines. In a world where the most valuable assets are patents and brands that relocate with a signature, GDP measures where lawyers file, not where life happens. Ireland is simply the honest extreme. The first country whose statistics office admitted the number had detached from reality. So the next time any politician, anywhere, points proudly at GDP, remember the island where the economy grew 26% in a year and nobody noticed anything. Statistics can have business models too. Ireland got rich twice, once for real, through education and openness, and once on paper, through the world's most sophisticated accounting hospitality. The trick is knowing which is which. The Irish, to their credit, invented a number to keep track. The rest of the world is still pointing at the mirage. If this changed how you read economic headlines, do 3 quick things. Tap like so more people find the video. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And turn on notifications because next time we visit the city everyone thinks got rich on oil. And almost none of it did. Camel market to global metropolis in 60 years. The real story of Dubai is ports, planes, and one ruthless bet. All the sources are in the description. This has been the Money Atlas. See you in the next one.